Imagine a city with impenetrable walls, where dark practices took place far from the eyes of the world. That was Jericho, the forbidden city. Few people know this, but inside those walls existed a shocking culture. Women were offered as sacrifices to the gods. Today, you'll uncover the dark secrets of this city and understand why Jericho was considered cursed after its destruction. Joshua 6:1. Now Jericho was securely shut up because of the children of Israel. No one went out and no one came in. Jericho wasn't just any ordinary city. Strategically located in the Jordan Valley, it flourished economically and stood out as a vital trade hub in the region. Its wealth was known throughout the land, attracting merchants and caravans from distant places. Gold, silver, and fine fabrics flowed abundantly through its bustling streets. Yet, behind Jericho's prosperous facade lay a dark side that few dared to confront. The city was renowned for its towering walls, considered impenetrable. Legend has it that they were so wide that chariots could race side by side atop them. This formidable structure made Jericho an apparently indestructible fortress, safeguarding its inhabitants not only from external enemies, but also concealing the sinister practices that occurred within its walls. Religious power in Jericho was heavily influenced by pagan practices. Numerous gods were worshipped, each associated with different aspects of daily life, from harvests to fertility and war. To appease these deities, ritual ceremonies were frequently held, and these practices went far beyond mere folklore or cultural tradition. Jericho's temples were places of mystery and fear. Priests, dressed in imposing robes and wearing terrifying masks, conducted rituals involving blood, eerie chants, and living sacrifices. To many, these ceremonies were seen as essential to ensuring prosperity and protection, but the reality behind them was horrifying. Among the most common offerings were women, given to the priests and, in some cases, sacrificed to appease the pagan gods. This dark aspect of Jericho's culture spread far and wide. Travelers told tales of screams echoing from the temples at night, of women mysteriously vanishing, and of rituals involving fire and human sacrifices. The terror surrounding Jericho was so intense that many neighboring tribes avoided even approaching the city's walls. Jericho's self-imposed isolation added to its aura of mystery. Few were allowed to enter or leave, and those who dared to defy this rule faced the wrath of local leaders. This strict control made Jericho not only a powerful city, but also a feared fortress, and to many, a cursed one. The people of Israel knew that conquering Jericho would be a monumental challenge. Beyond the impenetrable walls, there was a widespread belief that the city was protected by its pagan gods. This mix of superstition and physical strength made Jericho a formidable enemy. However, God had decreed that this city had to fall, not just because of its strategic position, but also due to the extreme corruption and wickedness that had taken root there. Jericho's riches were a tempting prize for any conqueror, but God commanded that everything be destroyed. Nothing was to be taken as spoils of war. This radical order underscored the profound spiritual contamination of the city. Defeating the soldiers wasn't enough. Every trace of idolatry and depravity had to be wiped out. Jericho's resistance seemed unshakable, but something was about to happen that would forever change the fate of that forbidden city. A vile practice involving innocent women would reveal just how deep the city's corruption had become. Jericho's religious practices were deeply dark and macabre. The city didn't just worship pagan gods, it had plunged into rituals involving human sacrifices, particularly of women. For many residents, these practices were seen as an act of supreme devotion, a price to pay to ensure protection, fertility, and prosperous harvests. Yet beneath this spiritual facade lay indescribable brutality. These ceremonies were conducted in temples dedicated to Baal and Ashtoreth, deities that dominated the religious landscape of the time. Baal, considered the god of storms and fertility, was feared and frequently fed with human blood in a desperate attempt to appease his wrath and attract blessings to the city. Ashtoreth, worshipped as the goddess of sensuality and fertility, demanded living offerings where young women were either sacrificed or forced to participate in degrading temple rituals. Deuteronomy 18:10, "There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or daughter pass through the fire." This biblical command clearly shows God's firm prohibition against these horrifying rituals. Yet in Jericho, this practice had already become a deeply rooted tradition. Many families, either out of fear of the priest's anger or in pursuit of divine favor, voluntarily offered their daughters for these rituals. Some women were forced, while others, deceived by promises of spiritual or social blessings, accepted this fate as a necessary sacrifice for the greater good. Women offered in these rituals were treated as mere objects. Some were publicly sacrificed in ceremonies filled with screams, deafening drums, and blood spilled upon stone altars. Others were given as sacred servants, destined to satisfy the desires of priests and the city's powerful elite. Abuse and humiliation were part of this cycle, making Jericho not only physically corrupt, but spiritually rotten. Many believed that these offerings ensured prosperity. If a harvest was bountiful or a plague was avoided, credit was given to the blood spilled on the altar. Women taken to the temples had their fates sealed, and few ever escaped the cycle. For families who lost their daughters, there was only the cruel consolation of believing they had pleased the gods and avoided a greater tragedy. Historical and archaeological accounts suggest that these rituals were so deeply ingrained in Jericho's culture that many homes had small family altars where minor offerings, such as food and animals, were constantly presented to maintain divine favor. This mindset reinforced the belief that the city's safety depended directly on these abhorrent practices. The cruelty reached such extremes that God decreed Jericho could no longer exist. The Lord knew that if this culture of sacrifice and immorality spread, it would corrupt entire nations. Thus, his command was clear: Jericho was to be utterly destroyed, and none of its customs should be carried forward. Those familiar with Jericho's reputation were horrified when they heard accounts of what occurred within its walls. It wasn't just a matter of idolatry. It was a society built on exploitation, abuse, and human sacrifice. Sin had reached such depths that divine intervention became the only solution. Yet even in this grim scenario, one person chose to resist. A courageous woman, living within the heart of this corrupted culture, was about to defy Jericho's fate and make her mark on history. Joshua 6:20. The people shouted and the priests blew the trumpets, and the wall fell down flat. Jericho, with its towering walls and dark practices, seemed invincible to human eyes. The city represented not just a military fortress, but also a symbol of corrupted spiritual power. The pagan beliefs that dominated its people fostered a false sense of security, as if those evil practices could ensure the city's eternal protection. However, what the people of Jericho didn't know was that their fate was already sealed. When Joshua led the people of Israel to Jericho's gates, God revealed an unusual plan for conquering the city. Instead of launching a direct attack or attempting to scale the walls, the Israelites were instructed to simply march around the city. For 6 days, they walked silently, accompanied only by the sound of trumpets echoing through the narrow streets and the watchful eyes of soldiers stationed atop the walls. To Jericho's inhabitants, this strategy seemed absurd. Confident in their sturdy walls and the protection of their gods, they mocked the Israelites. They watched with scorn as these men marched in silence, certain that nothing could bring down their fortress. What they didn't understand was that this was no ordinary military maneuver. It was a spiritual declaration that divine justice was about to unfold. On the 7th day, the routine changed. After circling the city 7 times, Joshua commanded the people to shout with all their might. The trumpets blared in a deafening sound, and at that moment, the walls that had protected Jericho for centuries began to crumble. It wasn't just a small crack. The massive walls collapsed as if they were made of sand. What once seemed invincible was reduced to rubble in seconds. The Israelites charged forward and conquered the city just as God had instructed. But something remarkable happened after the victory. God forbade anyone from taking any spoils. Gold, silver, jewels, nothing was to be claimed. Everything was to be burned or destroyed. This command surprised many, but it revealed something profound. Jericho's spiritual corruption was so severe that even its material wealth was considered tainted. Joshua 6:26. Cursed before the Lord is the man who rises up and rebuilds this city of Jericho. This curse marked a turning point in Israel's history. Joshua declared that anyone who attempted to rebuild Jericho would face God's judgment. Years later, this prophecy was fulfilled when a man named Heel attempted to restore the city and tragically lost his sons in the process. 1 Kings 16:34. The destruction of Jericho wasn't merely a military triumph, it was a powerful spiritual message. God demonstrated that no human structure, no matter how mighty, can withstand his will. The walls didn't fall because of brute force, but as a result of divine judgment against a city that had plunged into spiritual decay. Yet amid the total destruction, something extraordinary happened. One family was spared. A woman who had lived in the shadows of that corrupted society, marked by her past and reputation, displayed a faith so powerful that her life and her family's was forever changed. She not only survived Jericho's fall, but also became part of the lineage of the Savior of the world. If this story is surprising you, imagine what else the Bible reveals about mysterious cities and their hidden practices. So, subscribe to the channel now and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any content. Oh, and don't forget to leave a like so this message can reach even more people. Joshua 2:1. Then Joshua sent 2 spies secretly, saying, "Go and view the land, especially Jericho." In the heart of Jericho, amid a society steeped in idolatry and corruption, lived an unlikely heroine, Rahab. Known as a prostitute, her house was strategically built along Jericho's walls. Although marginalized by society, Rahab possessed a rare awareness. She realized that something far greater than Jericho's pagan beliefs was about to unfold. When Joshua's spies entered the city, Rahab made a decision that would alter her destiny forever. Instead of turning them over to Jericho's authorities, she chose to hide them in her home, risking her own life in the process. This wasn't merely an act of bravery, it was an act of faith. Rahab had heard of the miracles God had performed for Israel, and understood that the God of the Hebrews was unlike any of the false gods worshipped in Jericho. Joshua 2:9. I know that the Lord has given you this land. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the waters of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt. Rahab's words revealed something incredible. Even in the midst of Jericho's dark culture, there was growing awareness that the true God was at work. She believed in this truth and aligned herself with God's people despite the risk it posed to her life. When Jericho's king learned that Israelite spies had entered the city, he sent soldiers to Rahab's house to interrogate her. With cleverness and courage, she lied to protect the spies, claiming they had already left and misleading the guards in another direction. Afterward, she hid the spies under flax on her rooftop, ensuring their survival. Before the spies departed, Rahab made a desperate plea. She begged them to spare her family when Israel conquered the city. Recognizing her faith and bravery, the spies agreed. They gave her a scarlet cord and instructed her to tie it to her window. This red cord would be the signal for Israelite warriors to spare her household during the invasion. Joshua 2:18. Behold, when we come into the land, you shall bind this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down. The choice of this color was no coincidence. The red cord symbolized sacrifice and deliverance, a foreshadowing of the grace and redemption ultimately fulfilled through Christ. On the day Jericho's walls collapsed, Rahab's house was the only structure left standing. Amid the rubble and destruction, the red cord hanging from her window marked her family's place of safety. This woman, once rejected and discredited by society, became a powerful symbol of faith and courage. Hebrews 11:31. By faith, the prostitute Rahab did not perish with those who did not believe, because she had received the spies in peace. But Rahab's story didn't end there. After Jericho's fall, she was welcomed into the Israelite community and later married Salmon, one of Israel's leaders. From their lineage came Boaz, the great-grandfather of King David. Rahab, once defined by her past, became a direct ancestor of Jesus Christ, as recorded in Matthew 1-5. This transformation illustrates the incredible power of divine grace, proof that God is not limited by social labels or past mistakes. Rahab wasn't just physically rescued, she was spiritually restored, becoming a living testament that true faith can rewrite any destiny. If Rahab's story of redemption and faith inspires you, imagine how many other powerful accounts are hidden within the Bible. So if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now and hit the notification bell to stay connected with more incredible content like this. And of course, leave a like to help this message reach even more people. Rahab's journey shows that no matter how chaotic life seems, there's always an opportunity for a fresh start, one that's available to anyone willing to take a step of faith. The story of Jericho and Rahab goes far beyond historical or religious events. It carries powerful and timeless lessons that can reshape how we face our own struggles, choices, and moments of uncertainty. Each element of this narrative reveals profound truths that still echo in our lives today. One of the most striking lessons is that no human barrier is strong enough to resist God's power. Jericho's walls were considered indestructible, a symbol of absolute security for the city's inhabitants. Yet when the people of Israel obeyed God's instructions and acted in faith, those mighty walls crumbled like dust. This teaches us that no matter how overwhelming our problems may seem, whether financial struggles, family conflicts, or emotional turmoil, no obstacle is too great for God to overcome when we trust in Him. Another powerful message is that God rejects corrupted and immoral practices. Jericho wasn't destroyed merely because of its walls or its pagan beliefs, but because the city had become a center of spiritual perversion and human sacrifice. This reminds us of the danger of tolerating behaviors or lifestyles that contradict ethical and spiritual values. Even when something appears socially acceptable or normal, if it goes against what is right, it will inevitably bring serious consequences. The story also reveals that God always offers a chance for a new beginning, no matter how dark the situation seems. In the midst of a condemned city, Rahab was given the opportunity to change her destiny. Despite her background and her social status, her decision to trust the God of Israel not only secured her survival, but transformed her story so dramatically that she became part of Jesus' lineage. This teaches us that no matter how broken or shameful our past may be, God's grace can redefine our future. Another crucial lesson is that true faith requires action. Rahab didn't just believe that God would act. She courageously took steps to align herself with His plan. By hiding the spies and later hanging the scarlet cord in her window, Rahab demonstrated that faith is more than just a thought or feeling. It's a decision that calls for bold action. When we face difficult moments, it's essential that our faith translates into concrete steps. Whether it's changing our behavior, making a courageous decision, or taking a stand that reflects our trust in God's purpose. Additionally, this story shows us that God's mercy is greater than His judgment. While Jericho faced destruction for its corruption, Rahab was spared because of her faith. This reminds us that even in times of hardship and consequence, God's grace is always extended to those who turn to Him sincerely. Just as Rahab was rescued from the ruins of her city, anyone, no matter their past, can find hope and restoration through faith. Another powerful takeaway is the importance of obedience to God's will. Joshua and the Israelites didn't conquer Jericho through military strength, but by following God's precise instructions. The silent march around the city and the sounding of the trumpets seemed unusual, but it was their unwavering obedience that brought about the miracle. Often we are tempted to rely only on what seems logical or practical, but the greatest spiritual victories often come when we choose to trust and obey, even without fully understanding God's plan. Equally significant is the reminder that accumulated sin leads to inevitable consequences. Jericho didn't fall overnight. Its moral decline unfolded over years of idolatry and evil practices. This warns us that unchecked compromises can eventually form powerful walls in our lives, barriers that prevent us from experiencing God's best for us. Finally, the story of Jericho and Rahab challenges us to reflect on the power of repentance and restoration. Rahab wasn't just spared, she was fully integrated into God's people and honored as an ancestor of Jesus Christ. This redemption reveals that God doesn't merely save us, He elevates us to a place of purpose and significance. If there's one clear message from this story, it's that no one is beyond the reach of God's grace. If a woman like Rahab, living in the heart of a corrupt and immoral society, could find redemption and become part of God's plan, then anyone, regardless of their past, can experience a new beginning through faith. This powerful message invites us to examine the walls and challenges in our own lives. What obstacles are you facing today? What step of faith can you take to invite God to rewrite your story? The story of Jericho is filled with mystery, tragedy, and profound lessons. It shows us that no wall is too strong for God to tear down, that no darkness is too deep for His light to penetrate, and above all, that God always offers a chance to start over. Just as Rahab was saved through her faith and courageous actions, we all have the opportunity to find salvation and transformation by trusting in God. Rahab's past didn't define her future, and neither does yours. What truly matters is the decision you make today. If this message spoke to your heart, remember this: no matter how intense your struggles may be, no matter how hopeless your situation seems, God can bring a breakthrough in your life. All He asks is that you, like Rahab, take a step of faith. If this video inspired you, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss new content. And don't forget to leave a like to help this message reach more people. Now tell me in the comments, were you aware of this dark side of Jericho's history? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't leave just yet. There's another amazing video right here that I highly recommend for you to keep learning about God's Word. God bless you.